Hello, I'm Miranda, and today I'm going to be reviewing White Dwarf issue 492. Okay, so lots to jump into for this new issue. I'm a little late getting it out. I actually finished reading it right before heading out to Valhalla, and I just got back from that, so we're jumping right back in. But the reason for the delay is, I was off running that, and that was an amazing event. You should come sometime. Okay, so White Dwarf issue 492, heavily focused on Terminators, but there are several great things in here this issue. We're going to start off with a word from the editor, Lyle Lowry. Hi, Lyle. He talks about a little tiny bit about the hobby cycle. And I've talked about this before, where you sort of have elements of the hobby. Modeling, assembly painting, lore, playing the actual games. And he kind of discusses that too, about how the hobby cycle goes. And you'll buy some cool models that you're interested in playing, and then you'll paint those up, which will get you excited to actually play them, but that'll get you excited about buying a new model. And so it's a little bit more of a consumer cycle in this particular case, but I do think the hobby cycle is very real. Generally, I know people who play that are at least interested in two aspects of the main three of the lore, hobbying, and gameplay, which I know for me at least, I tend to bounce around between all three, but only in tiny elements. Like, I'll get excited about playing the games. I'm generally less excited about hobbying, but I can really enjoy it. But if I'm hobbying, then I'll want to listen to the lore, and then I just want to play games some more. So for you, do you end up having like any particular two, or do you participate in the entire hobby cycle? Are you a lore hound and a hobbyist and a gamer, or any one or two of those? Definitely let me know in the comments. And the contact page always has some beautiful showcasing of models. Different people write in to show off what they have done, or to ask for painting advice, or to see what color schemes were used. In particular, my favorite one from this issue is Horticulus Slimix. He's this creepy, weird snail with an alien on it. It's amazing. Very well painted. It's from just, oh gosh, it's so beautiful. So, beautiful, ugly models. All right, jumping over into the Worlds of Warhammer, there's a look at the heraldry and iconography of the different free cities. So this is nice because I don't have a whole lot of background in Age of Sigmar, and so reading this stuff sort of helps to render that world a bit for me. And they go over the different, the different factions and what their heraldry is, and what that heraldry is based on. And the one I particularly liked was Lethis, because they stand in defiance of Nagash. I know I say that as a Night Haunt fan, but I really dig the motif of their heraldry, which is like this skull, and bones, but that's in defiance of Nagash. It's the whole theme of it. And there's just a little bit of, a little blurb on each one of the different heraldries to explain what that is, which is kind of cool, because if you were RPing something, especially if you're playing like an old world game or something, you could come up, it gives you an idea of how to come up with maybe some of your own heraldry and such. Okay, next we have got the access granted White Dwarf bunker, and it's kind of the conclusion, even though there's the wrap-up and everything will kind of be discussed next issue. This is sort of the conclusion of all of the combat patrol games they've been playing for the last 3 months, and a little bit of a preview of what the next campaign is going to be. So the next campaign is going to be called the Slide Crown Isle narrative campaign, and that is going to be all Age of Sigmar based, so they're going to be doing a bunch of Age of Sigmar games for the next several issues instead of combat patrol. And we'll get to see battle reports presumably from that, and watch, how the scoring ranks for that, where everybody sits with their different achievements. Which does beg the question, have you been using the bunker point system? Have you or anyone in your group been using that for your hobby group or your gaming club? And how have you been scoring? Definitely let me know that in the comments too. The challenges on the bunker for this time around, it's for September, is to paint up elite units. So that would be the focus for this particular issue of the bunker. And there is a new mission for this bunker round as well, Infogeist Pursuit. So it's a full 40k mat, with the triangular deployment zone. The benefits include if you're near an objective, you can get bonuses like sustained hits and lethal hits. You also have an oscillating VP that varies from objective to objective. So each objective is not worth the same amount of points, which is going to force different movement on the board. So a fun new mission if you want to try that out. It does come with its own card to pull out, so you don't actually have to have the full magazine with you in order to enjoy that. And just like with the new 40k mission, there is also an Age of Sigmar mission called Fluctuations of Power. The next article in here is a kill team update. They are introducing deception cards. So they're just a separate deck, totally optional to play with, but if you're trying to, bam your game up a notch, I guess, you can incorporate deception cards. So that allows you to do things like steal the initiative or change an order on someone. You can also cancel out another person's deception, just depending on what card you pull, or if you are awarded that card from a campaign, say, that you were doing. And it also comes with another exclusive mission for Kill Team. This one is called Elaborate Deceptions. As you can imagine, it utilizes deception cards. Then on to one of my favorite articles in White Dwarf lately, Basic Training. In this one, they actually go over the value and importance of movement. And as a guard player, I don't typically consider a whole lot of movement, but since it is largely an objective control game these days, it seems important to kind of know where you're going. And it's really helpful because this is very general advice that you can always apply to your own army, and it's all about how to think of movement. So are you moving to prevent some other models from getting charged? Are you blocking to prevent somebody else from getting into an objective control area? Are you positioning your models to prevent deep strike, which is the thing I'm usually doing? But movement is pretty much one of the core fundamentals of the game, list building and movement. Your positioning is always so important in a war game, and especially in 40k. So the movement discussion here is really, really cool. Again, it talks about preventing a deep strike, being able to move into such a range as to be able to shoot, which is really important for those rapid fire weapons. Moving to get more valuable models out of trouble or prevent them from getting charged or completely obliterated if you have that opportunity. Moving to get yourself into charge range. And then, as always, at the end of these basic training articles, there is a scenario that is presented, and it asks you what you think would be the best way of handling that given scenario. And then the answer is at the back with actually several different potential solutions to it. So if whatever you came up with might well be in there, and then what they propose would be the best solution for this particular situation. So always worth reading the basic trainings. I love them. I appreciate them. The next article is the Hobby Hangout, in which Emily Ridding talks about painting an Aegis defense line. One of the things that is mentioned in the article is the idea of keeping a painting card. I don't know if any of you have ever done that. It's kind of a foreign idea to me, but if you have a model or a set of models, I guess, that you've painted in such a way, they recommend keeping a paint card with it that lists all of the paints that you used for that model, presumably so that you could always go back if you needed to recreate that look. And there actually are cards you could pull out of this magazine that are painting cards to keep track of that. I don't know if anybody uses that outside of the White Dwarf team. Do you guys use that? Is that something you typically use, or do you just remember what it is you paint, or do you just wing it every time? I basically wing it every time. And the next article is extra fun. It is the satellite uplink, in which they talk about the different bunkers that are all over the country and the world. And this time it's in my own stomping grounds. The Warhammer in Rio Rancho was actually the spotlight of this month's article, and I'm so excited to see, some of our locals here getting some credit. They hosted a Herald of Misery campaign from the Arcs of Omen storyline, which was a few issues back. And the bunker discussion here goes over how that campaign went. There's also some beautiful showcased models of some of our local players, especially the Scorpeth destroyers. Very nice work there. The next article in here is Echoes from the Warp. Duncan War talks about the creation of Combat Patrol. Now, Combat Patrol, for those of you who don't know, is a scaled down version of 40K. They're generally 500-point games, and there are specific box sets that have locked lists on what to play. And this article goes over why they did that. And the idea behind it is it's about making 40K more accessible to people by allowing you to enter the game in stages. So with Combat Patrol, you buy a box, everything in the box is your list, you fight against someone else's box, so they're all kind of balanced against each other. So you presumably are having a better game than just somebody cobbling together some 500-point game. The rules are substantially similar, though not exactly the same. The idea is that they don't use full 40K rules, but they don't have rules in there that are not 40K. So you're still going to be using, your ballistic skill. You're still going to have certain weapons on your troops that you're using that do exist in 40K, but that particular model might have the option of other war gear or other weapons that you would use in 40K that are not an option in Combat Patrol. And so it's just a matter of removing the list building question from getting into wargaming at all. And list building is probably one of the most challenging things to do. I mean, if you are learning a new game and people are trying to sell you on models, it's really hard to know what does my army look? What does my army look like? What is it supposed to do? How is it supposed to function? And a lot of that is just something you learn over time and with a lot of investment. So with Combat Patrol, they're trying to take that issue away, take that barrier to entry away by just having you play that level. Okay, the next article in here is called Faces of the Devourer, and it talks about the different phases of the Tyrannic War, specifically the Fourth Tyrannic War, and it discusses via reports the different phases of how a Tyranid invasion works, sort of starting off with a brute force attack from the Tyranids and to see and test the defenses of the planet, and then it being able to adapt to the planetary environment and the air quality, and just literally being able to constantly readapt to whatever the circumstances needed on the ground are, and then sending new waves and new waves in. And it's interesting. It definitely showcases how scary the Tyranids are. Then we've got an article in here from the Heavy Metal team with brush tips by Max Falige, I hope I'm saying that right, talking about painting Terminators. So many Terminators in this issue, many pages of Terminators, but it's cool because they show different chapters and how each of them are painted. So if you are looking to paint, say, the new Terminators from your Leviathan box set or any new Terminators that you got, check this article out if you're looking for some inspiration, or if you already know what chapter you want to paint with, you can see what they used and go from there. The next article in here is the little narrative story of a Black Templars vessel being invaded by Tyranids. Catching the theme of this magazine a little bit. Tyranids, Terminators. The Black Templars have been invaded by Tyranids. They're overrunning the ship. Parts of the ship are just completely going to pieces, and how the Black Templars are handling it. It's definitely a fun vignette in the world. Next up, we have a Combat Patrol battle report of Orcs versus Astra Militarum. We had the Veiled Stabbas versus the Cadian 34th. I'm not going to tell you how the battle ended, but it was definitely bloody. And before I continue, I'm just going to take a quick moment here to ask that if you are enjoying this content, if you like these White Dwarf reviews, to please let me know by liking the video, leaving a comment with kind of what you enjoyed from the video. It helps give me feedback on how to improve these videos. And then, of course, if you aren't already, subscribe to my channel, follow what I do, so I can keep putting out more content for you guys. All right, back to the review. Hopping on over to the Age of Sigmar world, we've got the Tale of Four Warlords. The September challenge involves painting up a Vanguard box, or about 500 points of models, and playing as many games as possible. Don't know if anyone else is following the 4 Warlord challenge, or if anyone's doing any of the Warlord stuff in your local game store, but looks like a fun time. So some of the painted up models in here include Chaos, Orcs or Oryx, Gravelords, Soulblight Gravelords, and the Gloomspite Gits, who I admittedly have a bit of a soft spot for, despite detesting mushrooms, but they are cute. And then to build a little bit more onto the lore, the next article in here is called Bastions of Foulness, and they are little spotlights on different areas in the Age of Sigmar, like specific areas. So for example, the Plague Spire, or the Fortress of Filth, which really has a ring to it. Gothazar, the Citadel of Bones, then the Varen Spire, the Seat of the Everchosen, and the Crimson Keep, the Lair of the Cursed Prince, which that story is actually really fun. It talks about how this prince is actually trapped in this castle, and he can leave it during the day, but he can't be gone for longer than like a day. And so despite him trying to like conquer as much of the world as possible, and he's incredibly capable and scary and dangerous, he'll come in and just siege and start destroying this other town, coming in to conquer it, but then he'll run out of time and just snap back out of existence. And the city keeps popping up, or the castle he's in keeps popping up in different parts of the world, so he can't just, go at it again the next day. It's funny. Then there's a fun Oryx story in here called The Spoils of the Wog, which is a bunch of Oryx versus Sigmarites, and how the Oryx are very, very capable, but because they are so poorly aimed and completely incapable of structure and planning, they're just so impulsive. It's kind of funny to watch them just separate off, or not follow orders, or just follow their immediate first impulse, and that's always to the benefit of the victims that they are going after. The next one is an article called Friends in Need. It discusses multiplayer games of Age of Sigmar and how to approach playing multiplayer games of Age of Sigmar. And it of course comes with several missions as well to enjoy. Next up, for you Warcry fans out there, there's an article called Weird Hollow Bladeborn. It gives you new rules for various different factions, including Ephelim's Pandemonium, Domitan's Storm Coven, Skabik's Plague Pack, and the Headsman's Curse. So if you are interested in playing any of those, or if you do play any of those, all of the cards and abilities are listed in this issue. Next up, for Warhammer Underworlds, Glory Points talks about building a Nemesis deck for Skabik's Plague Pack. And so it is the philosophy, kind of a philosophical approach to building a deck for that army. The next article is Born of War Part 2, which is a continuation of the discussion on Space Marine Inducti, which I talked about in issue 491. I had never heard of the Inducti before, but basically they are Space Marines that were being developed during the Horus Heresy, and the concern was that it took so long to make Space Marines that they were worried they would lose the war before they could really have a fully fledged army. So they had contracted with anyone and everyone, who could promise to try and make Space Marines faster. And so the Inducti are the product of Space Marines that have been made sort of in mass scale and without all of the special heavy work that would go into a full-on Space Marine. And they seem to be just about as good, I guess, but they're of course not going to be treated as such because they were made faster and cheaper, whatever. So the article in here, the last article and this one both talk about paint schemes for them. So if you were to use Space Marines Inducti, you could more mass paint them. You don't have to make them as special because they technically aren't as special as a full-fledged, properly made Space Marine. The next article in here is a Necromunda article called The Darkness Lifts. It follows a small little story and showcases the Dune Wraiths, which are sand dune guys, I guess. They're really cool. The little bug critters that they run around on make me uncomfortable, but they're definitely really cool models. And as always, one of my favorite articles, a Black Library snippet called Between the Lines. It's a brand new story. We are following Chaplain Sephax of the Tome Keepers. He is in a library reading about these different battles, and he's trying to piece together some of the commonalities of battles that have happened throughout various long points in history, because he's driving at some particularly sinister common thread that he might be uncovering. So we will see more and in the future articles to see where Mr. Chaplain Sephax ends up. All right, and that pretty much concludes this month's White Dwarf. Did you have a favorite article in here? I, of course, love the basic training and those Black Library snippets. They're always super fun. But getting these missions amassed, the little cardboard cutouts of different 40K missions, is kind of a nice thing to have in my back pocket because, I don't know, it's just good to vary up your games, you know? But let me know in the comments what you think, what you really liked about this month's issue, if you subscribe to White Dwarf, or what you get out of it. And a special extra shout out to the Warhammer Rio Rancho community. Excellent work getting spotlighted in this month's article. And yeah, to everyone else, we will see you next time. Have a great day.